Good evening, everybody. Glad you're here, and we'd like to ask you to take your seats. We'll call this General Government Committee meeting to order, June 5th, 2024. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Dennehy?
Here.
Councilmember Maloney? Absent. Councilmember Schmischer?
Here.
Councilmember Stein?
Here.
Councilmember Tracy?
Here.
Councilmember Worthington?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Here.
Mayor Troutman?
Here.
Thank you for that. This is our general government meeting, and we're going to be talking about the stormwater utility, as well as Black Hills Energy is here this evening to present on the recent storm event, all the snow that caused the power outages, and also on their clean energy plan. And with that, I'll turn it over to our city administrator.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick. Tonight we'll be discussing stormwater, the stormwater utility, how we calculate rates, a little bit of the history of the stormwater utility. And we have our Public Works Director, Leo Evans, and I will turn the time over to him.
All right, good evening. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, Mayor Pro Tem. Today we got a presentation, as Ryan mentioned. We'll cover just the history of the stormwater utility in a brief sense, talk about how we currently collect fees, how those are measured, what they're used for, and maybe have a discussion about some potential revisions if we want to consider any revisions to the stormwater utility. So in history, a lot of our stormwater utility emanates back to the 1972 Clean Water Act, which was the federal act that had a lot of environmental protections in it. It took until the mid to late 90s before it really came home to municipalities in terms of issuing MS4 permits, which I had the acronym on the first slide and I blew past it, but that's Municipal Separate Storm Sewer Systems. So any water, rainwater that falls in the city that ultimately ends up in the water of the state is our responsibility. We're responsible to ensure the cleanliness and the content of that water. We as Canyon City fall into the phase 2 of the MS4 program that was geared towards small municipalities. Phase 1 was kind of their trial program, really big towns. I think there was about 800 permits nationwide. Phase 2, I believe, has about 8,000, 9,000 permits nationwide. So you can see our first permit was issued to the city in 2003, and our stormwater utility was created in 2004, immediately after that. A couple of the other highlights, I guess, or some bigger milestones in the stormwater utility since then. 2017 saw a stormwater task force created that was a city and county effort. One of the big things that they looked at was the potential to expand the utility beyond the city borders to kind of cover the entirety of the drainage basins that end up in Canyon City. A lot of the water that ends up in Canyon City falls in the county and then runs down into us. So there's benefits to managing your basins on a basin basis rather than on a political boundary basis. Did not end up materializing that way, and we kind of moved on from that. 2019 was the most recent effort that I could find for a major stormwater effort, and that was our project selection committee that kind of oversaw and steered the city in about $8 million worth of capital projects and bonds that we took out, and just how those were prioritized and where those were spent. The big pieces of those were we did some storm sewer on North 9th Street in conjunction with the 2A reconstruction there. We did a bunch of culvert replacements in Dawson Ranch following their large flood event in 2018. And we're still working on completing the Rhodes Avenue Abbey Channel project. We bought property and built that entire outlet for the Abbey Basin that didn't exist prior to that project. And sorry, if anybody has questions or wants to stop and interrupt me, just throw something or raise your hand. Nobody's online. So the biggest reason for our stormwater utility is to keep us in compliance with our MS4 permit. These are issued by the state. The city has what is termed a general permit. We have the exact same permit that many other municipalities in Colorado have. It's not necessarily unique to us in any way. A lot of places operate under the exact same rules and parameters that we do. There's 6 primary components that are required of us within that permit. Those are listed there. Some of them are, maybe not as directly stormwater related as you would think in terms of public education and outreach. Glenda attends a lot of the events in town to just try to make the public aware of stormwater and, that all our water ends up in the Arkansas River, and You know, that has impacts to everybody downstream of us, just like everybody upstream of us has impacts to us. We do a lot of work in terms of construction site runoff control and post-construction runoff control. So anytime there's a construction site over an acre in town, they have to pull permits for that. We have to make sure things are monitored during construction, that there's no erosion, no tracking, and that the site is restored upon completion. Post-construction runoff control gets into managing the permanent water quality features that are built on a site. So detention basins, sand filters. The city is responsible to monitor and keep track of all of those, whether they're ours to maintain or not. You know, we have to know that Tractor Supply is doing a good job taking care of their sand filters on site and that they're working the way they should, and be accountable to report that to the state. The last component is pollution prevention and good housekeeping. Really, a lot of that is us making sure we're setting a good example for the community and doing the best on all our own sites to take care of the stormwater. The other thing I should mention, the stormwater utility was largely built to accommodate water quality. It does also address water quantity. You know, we do a lot of work for flood mitigation, and anything that comes up floodplain related, FEMA projects like that is also something that falls within this program. I think that's, if you look back prior to the Clean Water Act, you know, the town has had a lot of flooding, a lot of history of that, and it was also developed to kind of try to address some of those issues as well. All right, the stormwater utility itself is Title 1310 of our code. Title 13 is also shared with the potable water utility, so those are both captured in the same title. As we mentioned, these are really created in response to the MS4 requirements that were placed upon us, and then just the historic need for, you know, a dedicated and accountable funding stream to be able to support those efforts. Prior to the utility, stormwater work that the city did was, you know, a general fund expense, just like any other expense. It could ebb and flow with the good fortunes or bad fortunes of the city, or the priorities or needs of the city. The utility really establishes a dedicated funding mechanism to help support those efforts. There's a link there that will be available if you download this presentation, but financial consequences was another one that's come up recently. I'm sure you're all familiar with Colorado Springs. They were sued by the EPA and forced to pay fines, forced to enter a consent decree that required them to invest quite a substantial amount of money over the next years to basically catch up for all the lack of work that they had done in the past. So there are and there can be real consequences to not complying with our MS4 permit and not doing our diligence there.
And Leo, just to bring that point home, the lawsuit by EPA was for non-compliance with their state-issued MS4 permit.
Go ahead.
Yes, it was. And if you read the consent decree, it clearly states in there that they failed to enforce their own regulations and to follow their permit and meet all of its requirements.
Thank you.
All right. So I find that the easiest way sometimes to get a picture of what work is done within this fund is to look at the budget. So what we have here are all the numbers directly from the 2024 budget. You can see our revenue sits around $2.7 million a year. Our expenses in 2024 outstrip that, but that is primarily related to planned expenses for the Rhodes Avenue capital project. In general, this as an enterprise fund operates on a balance year to year. You know, the revenue collected covers the expenses of the fund in that year. It doesn't take in money from the general fund, from property taxes, sales taxes, anything like that. It doesn't expend money out to those funds for anything that's not stormwater related. An average year, barring that large tick for this year for Rhodes Avenue, around 40% of our budget is dedicated towards capital projects, and around 60% of that is dedicated towards O&M, just operating our stormwater fund. We have a staff of 3 full-time people that work on stormwater. Glenda's our coordinator, and we have a field crew that does all the operations and maintenance with our vac truck of 2.
Leo, could you, barring the Rhodes Avenue project, typically do we expend, what percentage of our annual revenue do we actually expend in an average year?
We typically expend 100%, or very near 100%. Like I said, as an enterprise fund, our goal is to spend the money that we collect and not over-collect what we spend.
Okay, that's helpful.
Could,
Thank you.
do I need to push my button, or
It's more,
is it pretty relaxed? Good.
open forum.
You have a revenue of 2.733, and then we have expenses of 4.6. Where'd you come up with the difference of $2 million?
Most of it's the Rhodes Avenue capital project. We have a budget in
Oh, okay, I see.
2024 of like $2.1 million, $2.2 million for that Rhodes Avenue project. So if you took that off of the 4.6, the expenses for 2024 would generally be about $2.4 million in that range.
Where did the 2 point, is the city kicked in the 2 million, or do we get that from grants or something?
That's money that came from the COPs.
Yeah, it was the bond
certificate of-
financing.
Yeah, bond financing for those
So,
$8 million worth of projects that were identified through that 2019 task force.
Okay, way back when.
Yeah, so it's kind of cash that was left in the fund account coming into the year that hadn't been expended out of those bonds.
Okay, it's not clear to me, is the MS4, is that a state permit or is it federal?
The state issues the permit, but it's based on the federal rules. The
And the-
Federal Clean Water Act delegates the authority down to the state to issue the permit.
Does that cost us every year?
Yes.
What's that cost?
To actually get the permit,
Do we have to pay them every year for a permit? Or is
we
it-
have to pay for a permit. The permit fee is not the expensive part.
Okay.
The expensive part is doing all the inspections, documentation, doing the good housekeeping. You know, we have to sweep our streets to make sure when it rains, any of the sediment and debris on the street doesn't end up in the river. All those kind of things are what really add up to the expenses. The permit itself is, what, a couple $100, I want to say? What is it, Glenda?
I believe it's closer to 850.
Well, it's minimal.
It's
but-
minimal, the actual permit expenses.
And they
yeah.
come down and check flow from our streets at some point. How do they know we're,
So far, we have not been audited by the state due to their lack. Oh, sorry. We have not been audited by the state due to their lack of personnel to perform the audits that they are required to do by the EPA. The EPA and the state are starting to do audits on MS4, all the permitted entities. They're mostly focusing on the Front Range right now. And I just got notified that Pueblo is going to be audited for compliance.
It hasn't came up since I've been here, but in my past roles, the state would come out and do sampling of all our outfalls to the rivers or lakes where we have to tell them essentially everywhere our stormwater discharges into the Arkansas River, and they would come sample those, test them, determine what the content and quality of that water is, report back to us if there was anything alarming to them. You know, we had to then go through and try to address those on a case-by-case basis. But I don't know that they've been here to
No.
test since I've been here.
CDPH does not do that. They do it for a different program. And their water quality, it's the 303D list, which is threatened and endangered waters in the state. If impacted waters are identified, it goes under a different program, and there's a chance that numeric limits could be written into an MS4 permit. That has happened with Boulder County on Boulder Creek. But as a general rule, they do not come down and sample our water.
you gotta be kidding me. So we don't really know, but we're causing extreme cost, expenses and ponding and doing all kinds of things to our citizens. We don't really know whether turbidity, we're meeting that turbidity or not, and they're not testing for it, and that's okay.
Pretty much.
Yep.
That's not,
We do
well, you
some,
know, I have a philosophical problem with this. This is occurring, it's flowing in from the county, it's flowing into us, my citizens here are being burdened by it, and it's, oh well, I have a problem with that. It's not your problem, but I have a problem with it.
I understand. Anything else? Jump ahead. All right. So the stormwater utility derives the majority of that $2.7 million from two primary sources. One is the monthly fee that all developed property in the city pays. As you can see on the right, we have a map like this, a GIS map for every parcel in the city that identifies the impervious area of every parcel down to the square foot of that parcel. And currently, everyone pays just over half a cent per square foot per month on that. It's the same rate for residential, same rate for commercial. Yeah. And we update those kind of based on building permits, new applications that come in. We try to update them when we get aerial imagery, but it's a lot of work to maintain a database of that size for every parcel in the city. I don't even know off the top of my head how many parcels that is. Probably 4,000 or 5,000 parcels in the city that applies to.
Could you, I hate to interrupt the flow of your presentation here, but could, one of the issues that is constantly, that council is constantly reminded of is that the fees essentially are based on impervious surfaces, okay? The idea is that we do have to fund this program, and that what the city is trying to do is recover fees to cover the program. Can you speak a little bit to the other mechanisms that might be possible for, other than a impervious surface, for funding the program?
Yep. If you'll let me go, we do have a
Please.
slide coming up in a few sheets that
Please,
shows how
thank you.
many of the other municipalities try to do that in a little bit different way.
One question on this slide.
Yeah.
When it says initial creation geared towards equity, could you speak a little bit more about that?
The thought process, as I understand it, was, what makes sense is the more impervious surface you have, the more runoff leaves your site. So the more area you have covered with hard surface that water can't infiltrate, the more water will leave. Thereby, you should pay more fees in that regard. So if you have more grass or more open soil on your ground, some of that rainwater will be able to seep into the ground and less will leave the site, and thereby you should pay less fees. So that was the equity that was used, in my understanding, at the original creation of it.
Okay, but it doesn't take into account if somebody has a lot of acreage that doesn't have impervious surface to where it wouldn't actually be leaving their site. It only takes into account the amount of impervious surface that they have.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct. And it doesn't apply to any non-developed, undeveloped parcels don't receive any fee on them. So I don't know
Sure.
if there's a ton of those left in town, but
But I mean, conceivably, you could have somebody who had a house on 10 acres, and I doubt that much stormwater would leave theirs, but they would still have to pay that impervious surface
yes.
fee.
Yep,
Okay.
they pay the same fee. Part of the logic is also in that first part of the title, they talk about everyone really benefits from this. You know, we use this fund to make sure that the streets can drain, that we maintain the storm drainage. So even if water doesn't leave your parcel, you benefit by the roads in town being drivable after a flood. You know, conceivably, you benefit by the city avoiding hefty fines or fees by the EPA that would be then passed on to everyone in town. So it certainly doesn't benefit everyone in the same way, and not everyone impacts it the same way, but that was the measure of equity that they chose to use at the original creation.
Okay, thank you.
The other major component or larger component of the revenue that the fund takes in is the impact fee. It looks like this was, I couldn't quite trace it all the way, but I believe it was added in 2018. It wasn't part of the initial creation of the utility. This is a fee that is placed upon new buildings or new developments in town. So on the right, you have a sample of a site plan that we got for a new house going up at Keystone Ridge. We have to measure that site, figure out what the impervious surface area is, and then they're charged a one-time fee of 0.2469 cents per square foot on those. Typically works out around $500 per a single-family residential parcel. You know, if you get to a big commercial parcel, those fees can get pretty hefty. I want to say the Arby's was in the neighborhood of $1,500 or more for that fee. And as best I can tell, that fee has never been updated since 2018. That was created once. There's no requirement in code that the council update that fee. It just says that it can be updated periodically as opposed to the base rate. You will have to set that every year around budget time that gets established. All right, So a staff perspective of some potential areas for revision, I think in our mind, revisions would be very limited. The regulations, whether we like them or not, are probably not going away or changing or lessening anytime in the future. There are financial consequences to those. On the right, we included this. This was from that group that met in 2018 to prioritize projects. This was the list at that time of all the capital projects that were identified by drainage basin in the city. In 2018, it was estimated that that cost was in the range of $120 million worth of stormwater infrastructure needed in the city at that time. So we focused our recommendations or our starting discussion points really on the database management, how much effort we spend managing the impervious surface area of every square foot of residential parcel. And then just some of maybe the changes in equity that have taken place over time and different things we could look at there.
Leo, before you go on, I want to bring it back to council as well. Part of, this large infrastructure need, this capital improvement need, is what drove the city to look at other ways of managing the stormwater and looking at the stormwater infrastructure that we have. And that's why we have the vac truck and the crew now, because we went and scoped some of those storm sewers, and some of them were 50 to 90% clogged. And with the creation of bringing that the vac truck and the creation of that team, we're able to service all of those existing storm pipes on a regular basis. And I think we touch them at least once per year and keep those clear. And since we've been doing that, we're seeing better drainage as well through the system.
Could I ask, in regard to this slide, I can sort of read it, but there's certain numbers of those projects that have been done, is that right? And then there's some that have not been, and can you just, are they all over different parts of town? Or?
Yeah, they're sorted by drainage basin, so it covers the entirety of town by drainage basin. This was the starting point spreadsheet that was used in 2018, 2019 to pick projects. So we did around $8 million out of that $120 million was done with that bond sale, or will be done when the Rhodes Avenue project is completed.
8, so far 8 out of 120 projected?
Yes.
Okay.
Could I also ask, I think we do a pretty hefty increase each year on what individuals pay for their stormwater fees. Talking about inflation and other things, is there a reason why one of the recommendations isn't looking at that 2018 construction development fee that's never been updated?
I don't think I have an answer to that. It hadn't been updated before, and I didn't really consider if we wanted to update that. It's certainly something we could look into. The city title lays out how that fee is to be calculated, when it's to be calculated, but it's just something that's never come up. We could certainly look at that if it's something the council would like us to investigate. It's not something reading the title, I don't believe it's something we can just pick a number and say we're going to increase it by 5%. We would have to go through the effort to recalculate what that fee should be. It's based on the total value of all the stormwater infrastructure that the city owns divided by the total square foot of impervious surface area that the city has.
I mean, I definitely don't think that the number of staff hours required to do those calculations would be something we would want to do every year. But given that it's been 6 years, and I think most of those 6 years we've done a pretty hefty percentage increase on individual rates, it might be worth doing, every 5 years or every 10 years or something like that to make sure that we're keeping pace with inflation on that side of the house as well, while also not making it so large that you're deterring development or anything along those lines.
Yeah, I think I think that's a great recommendation. You'll see similar things coming out of the water master plan as well. We have a lot of tap fees and things like that have not been updated for several years. So it's something that we could bring back when we make proposals for updating those fees as well.
Great. I'm really looking forward to that meeting in December.
Yeah, it was 6 years ago, but 6 years ago, a house was $150,000, and today it's $400,000 or $500,000, so that, it doesn't matter. You don't need to raise it. It automatically gives us a raise. in terms of dollars, yeah.
Right.
So I'm just saying, is that commercial property is no longer $5 a square foot, it's 40. So if you did a new construction like Arby's, if you did it 10 years ago, and now today, you've gotten the raise. We don't need to raise the fee, in my opinion, so.
But the fee that goes into stormwater is set at per square foot, not set based on the price of the square foot.
No, I'm talking about the one when you get your building permit.
I
You're
think
talking
it's-
of two different things.
Sure, but I'm talking about what's going into the stormwater enterprise fund.
Is it on the square footage or the cost?
It's on the square foot of impervious area
okay.
at the time it's built, so.
Okay.
The building is
All right.
not exceptionally fast right now, so we don't process a lot of them in a given year. You know, we've been doing 15 to 20 new
Okay.
residentials a year.
I misunderstood that.
Yeah.
I'll
It's certainly
turn my-
something we could pretty easily put the numbers together for and bring back whenever there's an opportune time to consider that.
Thank you.
So in terms of database management, I mentioned we track these for every parcel. We estimate that we spend somewhere in the range of 300 to 400 staff hours per year just updating those maps. And in that time, we're able to do roughly 180 to 200 parcels a year. So it takes about 2 hours per parcel between everyone that has to look at this and approve it, from the person that looks at it, the person that does the mapping, has to go to utility billing to change the utility billing. I have to sign off on it, I think, 2 different times, the way our process is currently set up. It's very onerous. Roughly 85 to 86% of the parcels in the city are single-family residential. We do this for all of them. And of those 85% of the parcels, they compose roughly 50% of the total impervious square footage in town, whereas the 15% of commercial parcels compose the other 50% of impervious square foot in town. So our time is much better probably spent on the 15% than it is on the 85%, you know, saying this person added a 30 square foot piece of sidewalk to their yard or whatever that may be. So it's very onerous. It's a very big database. It doesn't, you know, the change in square foot year over year probably doesn't really support the staff costs that go into keeping track of it right now. So it is equitable, or it was the equitable way that was decided to do it. So we've been honoring that and maintaining it, but it may be something we want to consider changing in the future.
One quick question on that. If a resident takes their impervious surface and gets rid of a lot of that and makes it back into a natural setting, is there a way that they can come down to the city and let the city know? And, okay,
Yeah,
that's what I just wanted-
absolutely. I think
Okay.
I meant to mention that earlier, but please, you know, if you make changes, or if you believe that, you know, you're being unfairly charged, get a hold of us. We can definitely look at the map and, you know, show you what is calculated for your site and decide if that's right or not, come remeasure it. A lot of times, if you have like a concrete pad or a parking lot on your site that's paved, that's counted, and you remove that, that typically isn't anything that triggers a building permit, and we at the city don't always even know about that or know that it happens. So it's not something that we have a good way to catch. Same way, if you pave a gravel driveway, we often don't know that that happens because it doesn't require any kind of permit. So it goes both ways.
So there is actually a form on the city website where a citizen or a person can fill it out and submit it to have it reviewed, their impervious area on their property.
Okay.
And we contact them and go out and look at it. If people remove things that require a demolition permit, that does flag it then, and once that's done, then it's adjusted. So, but there are mechanisms for that, for a citizen to ask for a review.
You know, there's also some pretty interesting AI technology out there that they can use just updated aerial imagery and automatically recalculate these year over year. We've kind of started looking at that. We don't have a real good feel for what the accuracy level of that is, but that might be something that would allow us to keep the same system, but maybe not be so onerous in how much staff time we dedicate towards it. You know, we let the AI do what it does, and if a parcel changes by more than 10%, then we drill down to it at a staff level and say, well, why did that change more than 10%, and does that really make sense, or is there something off here? But it's a little early in our, early for us to decide if that's the right fit, or something we want to consider. And if, you know, if we decide to look at an entirely alternative method, maybe we don't even need to consider it at all.
So the 300 to 400 hours per year of staff time to maintaining the database, that's essentially, if, you know, trying to translate that down to something that I can understand easier, that means that staff is taking time to go out and actually conduct measurements or review aerial photographs to verify current impervious areas. Is that right? Is that,
Some of that, yes.
is there
Some
a
of it is-
trigger, is there a trigger that staff has or is available to staff to trigger that review, or is it just, you know, kind of from the beginning every year?
There's a couple of triggers, so anything that comes with a building permit
Sure.
usually is a trigger.
Yep.
Anything that is requested by a citizen is a trigger. Otherwise, we try to catch things that we see or that get reported to us, hey, you need to look at this, or this driveway got paved recently, go check this. But really, I think Mike Pilo's our GIS tech. I believe he told me there's parcels from the original creation in 2004 that we still have never had an opportunity to update. You know, we're doing 180 to 200 a year right now with the amount of staff time we put towards it. So if we wanted to update them more often, we certainly could, but it's one of those things that comes as a trade-off of how much staff time and effort do we want to put towards that versus the other things we could be putting our staff
So
time
that
towards.
the 300 to 400 hours is GIS time, is
It's
that?
field measurements, it's GIS time, it's utility billing time to actually go in and change the utility accounts to have the different amounts to them. It's my time to review the accuracy of them and sign off on all of them that come through. It's
Thank you.
kind of a conglomeration of a lot of different people.
Sure.
Do folks get notified if this kind of review changes their rates?
I don't know.
So if we go out and field measure from a building permit, if it's an existing property and they've added something, we actually knock on their door, let them know what we're doing, measure the new, and inform them that, yes. And if they request, we will provide them with an estimate of how much the change is going to be. If it's done by aerially, something that the staff has noticed that needs to be updated, the property owner typically is not notified in advance that that's going to change. We just do that. We do manage the database, so if they call in with questions on why, we can tell them exactly what was added or subtracted, but
I wonder if it would be possible to notify folks regardless of if their rates are changing, why they're changing. I don't know if that would be a larger administrative burden, but I know a lot of folks have it on auto pay and may not even realize that the city has done that kind of review. And if it's an error, if it's done by GIS, then.
so I have put out, like in my quarterly stormwater newsletters, every year when the base rate goes up a little bit, I make sure and put that in the stormwater newsletter that is when we did get our new aerial footage. I did do a little bit in the newsletter saying that we had received this. Staff would be reviewing as we could, and people may see a change, but they were always welcome to call us. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, let me look into that a little bit too. There probably is an easy way we could put a trigger on it where if it changes by more than 5% or something, we flag it some way through utility billing and let people know that, hey, this changed, this is why it changed. A lot of them that I sign honestly are, insignificant changes of, a couple of pennies on a bill.
Sure. Thank you.
Did you have some?
I was just going to say, with the new financial management system, there may be better tools to inform people as well.
This one, I really wanted to talk about some equity. It comes in mostly on our commercial parcels. These two parcels are two parcels from the city. The one on the left is the little commercial mall there along the side of 16th Street with the Dollar Tree and the Pizza Hut. The one on the right is the Tractor Supply on East Main. Both of those parcels have around 100,000 square foot of impervious surface area, so they both pay roughly the same monthly fee for each site. The parcel on the left has no stormwater quality or detention features on site. You know, all the rainwater that falls on that site immediately leaves that site and goes downstream. The Tractor Supply has sand filters on 2 of the perimeters that collect most of the water that falls on that site, is treated and then slowly discharged back into the system. So, you know, 2 different parcels that really have different impacts on the system are paying the same fee right now. And you add into that the fact that the parcel of the Tractor Supply, they're also responsible to maintain and take care of those sand filters, so they incur expenses on their own to upkeep those on their own. And some other communities offer discounts in certain situations like that, and I think that's something that we could certainly consider. I think, excuse me, wasn't aware of it, but I think Glenda found some documentation. This may have been discussed once before, back in around 2018, 2019 at the city, and at that time, they decided not to go ahead with any kind of discount program, but it's certainly something I think we could pick back up again if there was an interest in looking at that, just to kind of recognize the different levels that go into some of those parcels. And they said mostly this would impact commercial, non-residential parcels that have their own stormwater on site. It wouldn't necessarily impact a lot of the residential parcels, as most of them do not have individual stormwater that they take care of. The city takes care of a lot of those.
It sounds like something worth looking at further. And for example, if we did have a differential there, then, you know, commercial properties, maybe some would decide to add in something, improvement like that, that would benefit them and the community. So something to think about.
Leo?
Yeah.
It's Kathy over here. Am I assuming, making the right assumption, that Tractor Supply being so much newer than the strip mall, that the building requirements were different to where Tractor
Absolutely.
Supply? So that's really the difference between them, is the age of the buildings and so forth. So,
It would be a timeline. If a site has gone through a process that triggered a redevelopment or a site plan, then since these rules were in place, then yes, they would be required to install those. So a lot of your older sites don't have anything. Most of your sites after 2003, 2004 will have something on site. All right, so back to John's question. We tried to get at least a scattering of what some of the other communities around Colorado are doing that have a stormwater utility fee. And the consensus is that everyone does it differently. No one does it the same. I don't think we are able to find anyone quite like us in that same thread that tracks each impervious surface area down to the square foot. Lots of places charge a flat rate for residential single-family parcels of, it's just, this is what it is per month for every single-family residential parcel in town. Some places break it down a little further than that and maybe tier it based on a lot size. So a smaller lot pays a lower fee per month, you know, up to a bigger lot paying a higher fee per month. Pueblo actually tiers it, but they tier it based on the amount of impervious surface area. So they still do track impervious surface on single-family residential, but they don't charge it down to the penny. You just kind of fall into a certain slot on the list, and that's what you're charged. Kind of the same trend goes for a lot of the same communities track their non-residentials the same way, where they're tiered based on parcel size, or, you know, I think, was it Loveland or Lamont? Longmont does theirs based on acreage of the lot. So there's just a lot of different ways to do it. And then the discount programs were way too complex to try to summarize on here, but we did include a link to a couple of communities that have them. Brighton, Colorado, and Adams County, Colorado were 2 that we found had pretty clearly defined discount programs. I think both of them got up near like a 50% discount if you hit all the different triggers that they include as a requirement of it. But they include a lot of different features. You know, they grant more discount if you collect water from off-site and you treat it in your facility, as opposed to just treating the water that's on your site. So there are a few of those around town that stormwater flows into them from off-site that they also collect and manage, so they would get a bigger discount potentially. Just a lot of variables in that scenario. So I think, you know, really if,
Can I just ask a real quick question? What is the
No,
average?
excuse me, if you would come up to the microphone, please. Thank you, Dennis.
I don't know this, but what is the current average rate charged per residential property in Canyon City?
I don't know that I've ever, I mean, I've only paid my bill, and I pay around $25 a month. I want to say it's probably closer to, I think I've got a pretty big driveway and all that, so I'm thinking mine may be a little higher than normal, but 20-ish.
Just looking at these numbers, I'm going to guess that our average rate that we're currently paying is somewhere between 2 and 3 times what any of these are.
That's certainly something we could look at. I don't know that I have the number off the top of my head. I think we're probably in the $15 to $20 a month range. I wouldn't be surprised if we're a little higher, but I don't believe we're 2 to 3 times higher than Evans or Erie or Longmont or those.
Well, I know
Pueblo is very
on
cheap.
my commercial property, that's 40,000 square feet, give or take. I'm paying $150 a month. I pay $6,000 a year on that, and which is a lot more than any of those.
Okay.
But
I would wonder, just in regard to that, if we would need to know more about the different communities. I mean, maybe there's an economy of scale with larger cities, and maybe there's really different drainage issues. Maybe there's communities that don't have the drainage flowing through like we do from outside the city limits. I don't know, but it just seems like to analyze that, you'd have to look at a number of factors.
There's a lot of variables that go into
Yeah.
assessing something like that, for sure. Well, I guess to summarize the parts that we would like to talk about, you know, if you were asking the staff for a recommendation on what alternative or what revisions they may consider, we'd certainly be interested in switching the way residential parcels are charged and looking at a flat rate or a tiered rate or something to that effect. Potentially, commercial could stay the same. Like I said, that's not a large number of parcels in town, and they certainly carry a bulk of the overall fee for the city, so maybe tracking those on a more individual basis is appropriate. And definitely, I think a revisit of a discount program is probably worthwhile. I got a little work to do to go back and look at the notes from 2019 and see what was actually proposed then and maybe why that was tabled at that time, to see if that's something we want to consider. You know, I think the other part is if we really wanted to see big change, we'd have to talk about what we wanted to cut or add to the budget, and right now I feel like we're doing a very good job of maintaining all our requirements. We have a long list of investments that are still needed in the town, so I don't think we would certainly advocate for a reduction in the fee, but, I don't know that there's an appetite for a large increase either, so. And I think with that, I really wanted to turn it over to the council to see, what other alternatives, you're interested in, or are there other aspects of the stormwater utility that we didn't talk about today, that I may have missed in this presentation that we can cover? And then if there is a desire to kind of take these down to the next stage, just really a recognition that that'll be a very long process. It'll be time consuming in itself. These are all codified in title. This is going to take a major rewrite of title to do any of these changes. So, just recognize that the staff will be, this will have to be a priority for us, and presumably this is something that could maybe get referred to the water committee and would take a fair amount of their time and be a priority for them to kind of help bring a recommendation back to this council if it's something we wanted to consider.
The city doesn't pay a stormwater fee,
City does not pay.
and we're putting inside.
Oh, do we? I'm sorry. Correct me, Glenda. Not for our streets, I
The
don't think.
stormwater utility fee is charged to all parcels, including city properties, federal and state properties within the city limits. The only ones that do not pay are city parks, because those are considered public properties, and very few of those have very much impervious
I don't
area.
believe we pay for the impervious area of our streets either. None of
No.
that is calculated
No, we
or
do not.
charged in
But
anything in there.
for this, for example, this building, City Hall, there is a stormwater fee that's charged to the city, and that money gets paid from the general fund and goes to the enterprise fund.
So we're putting in new sidewalks.
Yeah.
That's just, oh,
Things
well.
in the right of way, I believe, are exempted in the code. So the pavement for the street, the curb, the sidewalks, those parts are exempted. Even the part of your driveway that's within the right of way isn't included in the calculation anywhere. So if your paved driveway extends out in the right of way, that's exempted.
Okay.
What rate is the city paying at?
We pay the same as everybody else.
Okay.
No changes.
Excuse me, I have a quick question on this too. It's because when you had your comparisons up there, everything was in the metro area. Do we have any comparisons to smaller towns that are outside of the metro area? You know, Montrose, Craig, even out east, Lamar, or, you know, or even, you know, just something like that. I'd like to see what their comparison is as well.
Yeah, there's was population triggers for MS4 permits, correct, Glenda?
Yes, there are population triggers. So when I did some research, I tried to go with smaller communities that do have an MS4 permit and that I know have a stormwater utility fee.
We could take a look at Durango, Montrose.
Yeah.
They're probably the most comparable as far as being in a mountainous region and similar size.
Yeah.
Eastern Plains, most of those communities are going to be not going to meet that threshold.
So there are companies, there is one called Black and Veatch that does a biannual stormwater utility fee survey, but it is nationwide. There are a few Colorado communities, but they are larger, like Fort Collins, that are included in that. So,
So we can assume those small, and this is humor, by the way. We can assume those small towns don't contribute anything to pollution or anything like that. Pretty clean towns.
Yes.
I think the elephant in the room to me, and I don't know where we're at in all this, is that I think we're getting picked on for one thing, and that's a federal and state government thing, and I disagree totally with it. How comes the county? They
So-
don't contribute? Or look at our river right now. Who's paying for that going down there? I mean, are we going to get charged for that brown water? I mean, terrible stuff.
So the reason Canyon City was issued its stormwater discharge permit was because, one, we are next to a drinking water supply recreational river. Two, we have more than 1,000 people per square mile within our city limits. The county will probably never reach that population limit to be given a stormwater permit. Florence may at some point be incorporated because the state is going to smaller and smaller communities and issuing individual permits. There are some counties on the Front Range where they're unincorporated but heavily populated areas do have a permit.
And we're probably never going to win this. I think the county area, Washington, their water comes into our town, and it rains, and we pay for it. Doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
Really doesn't.
I didn't include it in here. I've seen a map before that lays out all the basins and what percentage of the land area is in the county versus in the city. The city is the minority, I believe, in every basin that comes through the city that we're ultimately responsible for in terms of percentage of land area.
Well, I've seen the charts too, so
You know
So
it.
I know.
I'd like to, George, I see you've got your hand up, and I'll recognize you here in a minute, so hang on there. But I think, from my perspective, I think that as a council, what our interest is to ensure equity in whatever fees we're charging. And that's the key. I mean, we've been hoisted by the federal petard on this stormwater issue. It's an unfunded mandate. It's not very pleasant. But nonetheless, I think that where, from my perspective anyway, where council wants to end up, I believe, is that we are as equitable as we can be. I think that this program is kind of a new thing. It's because of that there's decisions were made that perhaps need to be revisited now, and to make sure that we're being as fair as we can. As we were getting going, I think there was a kind of a one-size-fit-all approach, but I think now it's time to go back and look at some of our assumptions and some of the progress that we've made. I mean, just the difference between the strip mall there by City Market and Tractor Supply, that's a huge difference in what could trigger us into really expensive remedial actions due to federal action or state action under our permit. But George, would you like to chime in?
Thanks for allowing me to speak. First thing I'd like to do would be to invite you to take a tour of Canyon City. I got to tell you, I'm not proud of Canyon City anymore. And I mean, drive up to the high school and the area around the high school and look at the homes and the unkept properties that are in that area, gravel, weeds that aren't even cut. Some of that's got to be because of the cost of water, and people just can't afford to irrigate their lawns. I have a beautiful green lawn, and there's not a drop of city water that irrigates my lawn. I use irrigation water that I pay for every bit of outside water use that I have, and yet I have to, well, my water bill this month was $73.72, which I thought was a bit exorbitant. My stormwater utility fee is $28.34, month after month after month. I own a number of acres of property in the city. And I have to pay that damn stormwater utility fee, and there is no way that a single drop of water that falls on my impervious surface at my home ever leaves my property. In addition to that, the city's stormwater runs onto my property and damages my property. And I brought some photographs here to show you. It's not like it's going to break me, but it destroys the ambience of my place with the water that runs down Vine Street and then down my driveway. And that water contains, I suppose, magnesium chloride, because when it runs onto my property, it kills the grass, and you can't get anything to grow back on there except for, thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm sitting here at this meeting, and I'm feeling like there's this effort to increase the stormwater utility fee. And then you made the comment about some places just use a flat fee for residential properties. Talk about being unfair. You got to consider what impact a property has on that system, in my opinion. And certainly when I don't have any water that leaves my property, and I still have to pay that fee month after month after month, and in addition, I have to withstand the damage that the city's water does to my property by running its street water with its magnesium chloride onto my property and kills the grass and just makes it look bad. Anyway, that's about all I've got to say, other than I'm distressed about all this. And I think that something needs to be done, and I think that you need to consider individual properties and how they're impacting the system. Those of us who are not impacting the system have no real responsibility to fund a program so that everybody benefits from it, in my opinion.
Thank you for that, George. Thank you. Any comments from council?
Oh, just kind of a question, comment for George. Hi, good to see you. You know, just a few minutes ago, well, first let me say, I don't think anyone's talking about raising fees right now. right now. We're trying to
Right,
figure out if we need to restructure
I'm just saying, I
it.
got that feeling sitting here in the meeting, you know, that,
Well, I think what feeling you might get from me is, it sounds like if we had all the money in the world from somewhere to complete building out a stormwater control system, then we wouldn't have stormwater damaging your property or other people's property or going into ditches, and I'm afraid to even bring that subject up. But the question is, well, where does that money come from? If we've only completed roughly $8 million out of $120 million in projects identified just a few years ago, I mean, it's kind of a struggle to figure out. And we know that as a community, I don't think, my recollection is anyway, that I don't think the river's our biggest problem. It's these other drainages that come through, the East Canyon drainage and some of these other areas. So it's just, I guess, a question for me that how do we find the money to stop stormwater from coming onto your property or stopping other kinds of damage that occurs? I don't know. If you have any thoughts on that, let us know.
just that probably it's just going to take more time to get those facilities developed, which brings a question to my mind that I haven't mentioned, Rhodes Avenue and that project. Was it in fact built and then rebuilt?
No. Leo, you want to?
It's been started and had to put in suspension a couple times when the irrigation water comes on. It's not 100% finished yet. They built the channel up from the river in 2022. I think the year before I was here. Last year, we pushed a water main and a sanitary sewer underneath the railroad up at East Main and Rhodes Avenue, and then we ran out of time to get the 3 stormwater pipes in underneath the railroad before the hydraulic ditch turned on for the year, and we would have had more water than we could handle.
Oil Creek Ditch.
We're upstream of oil, so it'd be the tailwater from the hydraulic coming on down into the Oil Creek. But yeah, before the water came on, and we would have been in a big hole of water without being able to do anything. So the hope is we'll be able to push those last 3 pipes in this year once the ditches turn off for the year and things dry up.
Now, it's probably caused a problem for the city, but historically, the ditch company believed that we had to accept historical flows of stormwater into our facility. I learned from a water attorney up in Denver a number of years ago that is not true. And at that point, the Oil Creek Ditch Company started telling the city, you can't run your stormwater into our facility anymore. We're not a stormwater facility. We're an irrigation facility. So that's probably caused a problem for the city too, and exacerbates the problems of stormwater.
Right, we have a problem. So,
Just do it more slowly, I guess.
detention pond for the funds or something, okay.
Okay.
Other
Thanks,
comments
Emily.
from council? We do, we've been going for about an hour now. And we do, if people have some input, and I just wanted to make sure that council had a chance to say anything they wanted to say. Okay, so yes, please come up and introduce yourself.
I know some of you, I don't know all of you, but my name's John Sand. I am the president of the South Canyon Ditch Company. And as George just brought up the fact of the ditch water, do all of you know where probably 95% of the stormwater in South Canyon goes? Do you know where? In my ditch, it goes in my ditch system. My ditch rider is the one that tends to it, clears the muck, clears the garbage out of these ditches, and every time we come to the city for help, we're basically told, not our problem. Well, it is your problem. You collect stormwater fees from every resident in South Canyon, and your water is carried by our system that we pay for, we manage, and we maintain. That is not fair to my shareholders. I represent over 6,000 shareholders in South Canyon. And for us to foot the bill on your stormwater is absolutely absurd. And when we ask for help with ditches being plugged, laterals being plugged from sediment, limbs, garbage that gets flushed out of these, flushed out of the gutters from storms, we're set to deal with it, not you. And we call and ask for help, and we're basically told, not my problem. We have 2 laterals right now. There's one on the corner of 8th and Griffin. That stormwater drain has been plugged for over 2 years. No one has touched it. We ended up digging up the north side of the street to figure it out, and we still don't know where that storm drain empties to. It's plugged solid. There's not a drop of stormwater goes in that grate. It goes there, but it ends up running out and on down the street. And for the love of me, I don't feel it's correct that when my people have an issue with stormwater flooding and filling up their laterals with garbage and sediment off these streets, that it should be their responsibility to have to pay to clean it up. We called you, we asked you for help. You just said you spent all this money on a vac truck. Well, why the hell can't it come out there and help my shareholders when it's your stormwater filling my shareholders' laterals with your garbage? And instead, we call and ask for help. Dennis and myself have spent numerous times and phone calls with the city. We've met with numbers of you at some of the sites. Not our problem. Well, it is your problem. And you need to pony up. We're all paying for it. You're just sitting there, an average of probably, what, $20 per residence in South Canyon? South Canyon is probably 80 to 90% all residential houses. There's very little undeveloped land over there. And each one of us are paying that kind of a fee on a monthly basis for zero, because we get no stormwater whatsoever. We get no help with our stormwater. It's all dumped into our ditch system that we maintain, and I have to pay a ditch writer to go out and clean it up, or one of my shareholders has to pay money for Dennis to come and rod the ditch out or jet the ditch out when you have a multi-$1,000 set of equipment over there and we're not using it, or I'm afraid I'm going to get my jetter hung up. That's just BS. And the city needs to step up and help these people out in South Canyon. You're worried about North Canyon. You're worried about roads. What about the people in South Canyon? We pay just as much money as the people in North Canyon per lot in stormwater, but yet we get zero cooperation from the city to help clear our drains. And it's got to stop. We cannot continue to have to pay these fees and still get no help. If we called and you guys say, oh yeah, we'll come right out and clean it out. But we don't get that. Well, we did it once and we're not cleaning it again. That's BS. So what's your guys' answer? I mean, do we get any help, or are we just barking up the wrong tree and spinning our wheels as well? You're worried about the roads project. You're worried about 9th Street. South Canyon's full of houses over there, and there's not one drop of stormwater runoff whatsoever. All that stormwater goes into a system that was there long before these city streets and everything were there. That South Canyon ditch dates back into the 20s. That system was there. That system was there long before your streets and your buildings were there. And now we're the ones that are suffering the consequences from it. And it's just not fair, and it's just not right that my shareholders should have to put up with this. You wouldn't want it at your house. We don't want it at ours. So the city needs to step up and help us out and quit just shutting the door and saying, well, not our problem. Because it is your problem. You're being paid. You get $2.7 million a year, and not one damn nickel of it is spent in South Canyon. We're the ones, my shareholders are the ones, that are taking care of your stormwater. And yet they're paying for your stormwater to be taken care of.
John, do you have specifics? You said 8th Street and Griffin?
8th Street and Griffin is one of them?
Well, all right, calm down. can you get that to us where you think where they are blocked apparently?
It has
And
been
let's-
blocked for 2 years.
I know.
And
Is that-
we've called,
John,
we've
just
called.
calm down.
And they will not come.
All right, we've said that. Is it 8 and Griffin? Is that what you're
Yes.
talking about? Is there other ones?
That's just one of them
Can
that
you-
I know
all
of
right.
that's in my area.
Then what we need to do is take a look at that, and we will. So give us a list of that, or give someone here, give me, or Leo, and let's take a look at it.
But what about the other stormwater that's, the Griffin is just the
That's
the
what I'm
one at
saying.
8th and
Which
Griffin
are
is
the-
a minor problem.
That's what I'm saying. The other ones are, which ones are they? What are we talking about here?
We're talking about the laterals that come along. There's a lateral on the north side of Griffin that comes off of there.
All right.
It's full of garbage.
Let's enumerate those specifically, and let's take a look at those.
My ditch writer, he has a whole entire list of where the
Can we-
stormwater is impacting our laterals on
Let's
the
take a
major
look at
portions.
that
We've
list.
got
That's-
5 different areas that it's
Let's
affecting.
let's get those lists. Where is that? That's all I'm saying.
Right there.
All right, we can get it then.
We'll get them to you.
All right,
Thanks.
thanks.
Dennis, you want to follow that?
And I just want to say just real quick, I heard that, and I do think on our ditches and within the city limits, it is, as the water's coming off our streets and the runoff, the stormwater's going there, I do think it's, the city needs to do something there other than washing it into, again, ditches that people pay for. I'm on a ditch that people pay for, and I know that I've worked with South Canyon as well, because our ditch comes off of South Canyon. And I do know that there is a lot of trash in that does get washed in off our streets. And it does go into, again, shareholders who have paid for these ditches. And it's not just South Canyon. It's Lincoln Park Pump Ditch. It's Crooked Ditch, because all of us get our water off of South Canyon. But if there's garbage going in there, the last thing I want to have is garbage being pumped out, clogging other people's pumps. It's just something I think that we all need to, and I've heard this before, from ditches. I've heard this before. But I think it's something that us as council and as the city, I think we all need to really step in and take a look at this and see what we can do to secure so no garbage and that gets washed into these ditches.
And I hesitate to even say this, but I think we've heard a little of both tonight, and it's all important, and that is go a little slower on what you need to spend for infrastructure improvements, or find the money somewhere and make all these improvements now, or somewhere in between there. And I don't know what's right or what's wrong, other than I know that it will take money, and this is an enterprise fund. So that's kind of where the money has to come from, unless there's grant money somewhere, to make these infrastructure improvements to protect all the ditches and the laterals. So I guess that's the balancing act, and we have to figure out where all that lands.
Okay, I have a short comment. I'm sorry, Dennis, just
No, that's
a little
okay.
bit. I represent the city's shares of water on 3 different ditch boards. I'm well aware of this issue. What we really need to do as a community long-term is to have a system that can carry that stormwater separately from the ditches back to the river, back to where it belongs. We have to have it, and that's going to cost a lot of money. And it's something that we have to plan for. We have to talk to other government entities to see what kind of support we can get. But I don't think we want to keep burying our heads in the sand over this. We need to know this is out there. And it's not only is it not fair, it's against water law to dump stormwater into ditches. So that's something that's happening. And when there's a big, huge storm, with the best of intentions and drainage, it's still going to overflow into the ditches. And then it's going to cause problems for people who live along. I've talked to a lot of people who live along 9th Street, and they're having issues. So, but it takes time. This takes time, and it's going to take a lot of money down the road. But we have to have a vision of where we're going, and staying the way things were in the past or where they are today is not going to solve this long-term. Thank you.
Dennis?
Ta-da! Okay, Dennis Weed, thanks for having me. A lot of this is just going to be some observations, but so the stormwater utility has been around for 20 years now. When the stormwater utility initially started, the rate we were being charged was 0.001821. It's 3 times that now. So that's it's 300% of what it was 20 years ago. That's pretty hard to justify in my mind, but I think that the following question or observation maybe ties it in. And how many departments, and specifically which departments in the city, charge the stormwater utility fee? And I mean, that's a question, I don't expect to get that answer right now, but that is a question I would like to get answered, is how many departments charge the stormwater utility fee, and what percentage of their budget are they charging to the stormwater utility fee? And then what? This ties in, for years I have said that the stormwater utility is being misappropriated and that it's not being used the way that it was intended. So take that same question and tell me over time what percentage of every city department have they charged to the stormwater fee? And I think you will see that initially it was 0. And now that's gone up. My guess is it's somewhere around 25–30% of each department's budget is being charged a stormwater fee. And that's not what it was ever intended for. Something that I've brought up in the past is, I know apparently, according to Leo here, it's in the code, but I think it's wrong to have the stormwater fee billed on the water bill, because if you protest your stormwater fee, well, there is no way to protest your stormwater fee except get your water turned off. And then, I mean, so that's kind of my general observations there. Stormwater fee is 3 times what it's 300% of what it was 20 years ago, which is kind of insane, and it just keeps going up. And I mean, it's a classic. I know a fee has to be justified, but we're a government, and governments can always justify spending as much money as they want. I mean, you could infinitely raise the stormwater fee and justify it by just charging more and more stuff to it. You know, it's like 20 years ago we had street sweepers. We had street sweepers 40 years ago. And we swept the streets to keep the streets clean. It wasn't because of a stormwater issue. We swept the streets to make the streets look good. And now street sweeping and the street sweeping equipment and all that stuff is being charged to the stormwater fee. And that's not right. That never was the way it was, but we're just taking advantage of the fact that, hey, guess what? There's a magic pot that we can shove all of these expenses over on this magic pot, and we can just keep making the pot bigger because, well, you know, we're spending the money, so clearly it's justified under the fee. But stormwater billing should not be on the water bill. It should be a separate billing. And then, of course, the elephant in my room is that according to the city's own municipal code, for 20 years, the city has been overcharging the majority of residents in this city on their stormwater fees. And And it's specifically the issue of eaves on buildings. And I know it's a problem, but eaves are not part of stormwater. They're not part of impervious surface. So the city is consistently, knowingly, willfully overcharging everybody, or almost everybody, stormwater fees based on their own regulations. And, I mean, you guys are setting yourself up for a real problem because you're knowingly overcharging. And what are you going to do about it? And I mean, we're talking about maybe having, coming up with other ways to assess stormwater fees. Well, you better hurry up and do it, because I'm guessing you're not going to go out and measure all the properties. And so for the next year or 2 years, or however long it takes you to figure out what our new stormwater fee charging plan is going to be, you're going to continue to knowingly and willfully overcharge everybody in town on their stormwater fees. And I mean, if nobody else does something about it, I will, because I'm tired of it. So that's the elephant in my room. And also, just a comment, it's the stormwater fee is 2.6 million, or I mean, it generates 2.7 million. 60% of that is basically overhead. If that was a charity, it'd get an F. Thanks.
Thank you, Dennis. I think we do have other presenters. If you have a comment, can you make it brief, please?
Sorry, can I ask about that?
Oh, well, I thought that we have a audience member, and then we'll get to you.
Okay, I wanted to directly
Oh,
about
it's-
what he had raised, but that's fine. Happy to wait.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your recognition. My name is Melinda Williams. I am a hometown girl. I grew up here, graduated high school, moved away and came back in 2017. I live along one of the ditches, and I wasn't sure that I was going to speak tonight, but listening to some of the concerns here, I think that some of what I have as a concern is definitely relevant. In the mobile home park that I live on 19th, we pay stormwater fees, just like everybody else, but we pay them to our landlord. And I don't know if our fees are in line with what he's being billed, but they go up every year. And in 2021, I have photos with me tonight, but in 2021, a number of our community members filed complaints with the Mobile Home Park Oversight Committee because our property was flooded. I have photos that show what kind of water we dealt with because it had nowhere to go after a construction project was completed in that park. For plumbing and water in the streets. Since then, in the last 6 to 9 months, that owner has come in and put road base on top of our roads to address the stormwater and potholes that happen on those streets in that park. And yes, it's private property, but we're still paying that fee, and that water has nowhere to go. In addition to that, one of the things that comes to mind to me that actually brought me here tonight, I don't know that this is the right place or time to bring it up, but the ditch berm is failing. And there's a couple of different reasons why. So if you all could give me the information on who needs to be contacted and shown photographic evidence of what's going on in that park, I'm more than happy to supply that.
Thank you.
Does anybody have that information? Thank you.
Do you know what ditch it is?
It's the one that runs 19th, but between The hydraulic, thank you very much.
Yes. Amy, you had a question
Yeah,
for
I
Dennis?
Actually, questions for city staff based on Mr. Weed's presentation, and then also, I'm so sorry, I didn't get your last name, William, based on Ms. Williams' presentation. Do we know if other departments receive any of their funding from the stormwater fee?
We have our cost allocation plan, and I can get that information for you.
Okay.
If I could, I think the point was that other departments are charging their time to the stormwater department.
Exactly, based on the
Right.
cost allocation plan.
Yeah.
Meaning like the city administrator, the finance director, people who oversee the efforts that are going into stormwater. That's helpful to know. My other question was the eaves and the municipal code. If you could just speak a little bit about that. Certainly, I don't think anyone up here wants to willingly or knowingly overcharge any residents for anything. So if you could address that concern that he raised, that would be really appreciated.
Do you want to take that one, Leo? or-
Sure, I can take the first crack. Our code has a definition for an impervious surface, which includes a roof. The stormwater impact fee is based on a different definition, and I can't recall exactly what it is off the top of my head, but that measurement is based on the building square footage. So the impact fee is charged based on no overhang in the eaves, but the actual monthly fee can include the roof. So there's inconsistency between the two measurements and how they're charged. So the monthly fee can include the roof, but the impact fee is specific that it's based on the square footage of the building and then any paved surfaces outside of that.
So from my perspective, at least, I would certainly want one of the alternatives that we consider and, be thinking about to be cleaning up our own code language to make sure that it's consistent throughout, so that there isn't this kind of discrepancy or confusion about what can and cannot be charged. Did you want to further comment?
Excuse me, as chair, I want to step in here. We do need to move along. We do have other presenters, and we need to be.
Yeah,
So perhaps afterwards, you can dialogue with the.
It's
councilperson.
100% clear. The impervious surface is measured from the exterior surfaces. It's in the code. It does not include the roof.
Sorry, my last question with regard to what Ms. Williams raised. If flooding is caused by the city, what action or what remedy do residents have?
I don't have flooding costs, but.
May I clarify? The city didn't cause this flooding. It is natural waters, rains, hails, snow.
City stormwater.
That particular mobile home park is located in a regulatory floodplain, so it is an area that's been identified by the city and FEMA as a frequent flooding location. So some of it is by the own design, and the way the site was built within a floodplain. The homes are all elevated above the floodplain, but obviously the ground surface, the streets, the things like that are still in the areas that are frequently inundated.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to say one sentence because I think it's important to point out that we're hearing very different messages from people. They're all valid and all important messages, but I have a little bit of whiplash here between folks who want to spend more to protect ditches and protect other structures and so on, folks who want to collect less and spend less because they don't like this stormwater fee. So I think this will be an area that we'll have to spend a lot of time on in discussion, but just so people are clear that we're getting mixed messages here.
Thank you. With that, I think we'll call to a close this portion of our meeting. And thank you. Thank you both for being here, and thank all of you audience members for being here. And yes, Manny, we do have other presenters, and we do need to be. Well, all right. Oh, we don't need a slip. We don't need a slip.
Again, thank you for letting me speak. My name is Manny Colon. I'm the president of the of the Kansas City Hydraulic Irrigating Ditch Company, on a couple other boards. Stormwater has been an issue or a problem for me my whole life, and it's a problem for the city, and I recognize that, and it's a problem for the county. And I don't want to get into your fee and your schedule and what you're doing and the raising of that. That's not why I'm here. I want to mention to you that with urban encroachment, we're getting more pressure from EPA, and that's the MH4 permitting and what Colorado Springs has gone through. If we look at Colorado Springs and what they're issued with, we're in that same position that they were in 20 years ago. And that snowballed on them, and they're having a heck of a time taking care of their stormwater. I go back and say, our forefathers were very brilliant in a lot of things they did, but they sure didn't take care of stormwater as it went through town. So now that's all built into one big problem, and how do we get that stormwater to the river and clean? It can't be dirty, okay? So we look at funding, and the only way we can possibly ever catch up is to have a grant of some type. So we have to spend our time, I'm not going to say arguing about whether you raise our rate or don't raise it. I'm saying we have to go to another source far in excess of who can pay for it internally in our city. We have to look at all the water issues going on the Colorado River and all the other drainages, because it's all over the state. And we have to say, what's our piece of the action? We need to get our grant writers watching everything that comes up and say, okay, if this grant is even close to something that will help our stormwater, let's jump on it, let's write it up, let's try to get every dime we can get federally, because we can't afford it with our city residents paying the bill. We already know that. Everybody's been screaming that for well over 40 years. In 1940, the hydraulic ditch wrote a letter to the city saying, this is illegal, we can't do it. Well, here we are a few years later, and we're still doing it. I know that goes on, and I'm not blaming anybody here. I'm just saying that's the way it came down, and to build a system to go to the river now is extremely expensive. So we have to study that and say, what is the best thing we can possibly do? Number one is go after a grant. And there are federal grants. I've had a couple of them. I've been shot down, and I'll just be real straightforward. We have to have the county work with the city. If the two of you are going to fight, we'll never get a dime. But if we go together and everybody jumps on it and we cooperate, there's a good chance we might get $1 or $2 here and apply it to the right place. If we study the whole system and say, this is where we can put it based on this grant and not this other grant, we'll go for it and try to work smart instead of dumb. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Manny.
Manny, I can tell you that our grant writer, stormwater is one of the priorities. It's one of the things that she's looking for, and we're always a willing partner.
Very good.
Thank you. With that, let's move into and invite our Black Hills officials up here. You can bring some chairs so that you can all share the hot seat up here. And John, will you be introducing everybody?
Yes and no. How about
Yes and no. And Ryan, you had a comment? Oh, okay.
I'm going to make a quick comment. I'm sure that for once they're glad that we're the ones up here having taken the commentary tonight. The shoe's on the other foot.
You'll have to share the microphones there if you would as you speak. Thank you.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. Good evening, Council, Mayor. Thank you for having us this evening. Know most of you, John V. Hill with Black Hills Energy, Community Affairs. And we have a fairly good-sized team here tonight. I'm going to allow Campbell to introduce not only himself but the people at the table, but we've got a team of people behind us, and I just want to make sure I have them in the right order. Yep, looks good. So going left to right, we have Patrick Sullivan, who's a transmission engineer, Adam Treviso, who's a substation manager, Spencer Kimball, and is government affairs, as is Gil Romero. So Two of them, the last two, just happened to be here this evening. The other two are subject matter experts in case we need their help. With that, I'm happy to hand this over to Spencer. Or, excuse me, Campbell.
Good evening. Am I on here? Can you see the green light? He does have the button pushed.
Okay, great. There it is.
Oh,
Good evening. As John said, my name is Campbell Hawkins, and I'm the new Vice President of Colorado Utilities for Black Hills Energy. I have responsibilities for both the electric as well as natural gas business here in the state of Colorado. About 300 dedicated professionals focused on keeping the lights on and the gas flowing. So real honor to do that. While new to Black Hills Energy, I'm certainly not new to the utility business. Been in the space about 20 plus years. Prior to that, in the competitive energy business sector, including being a business owner. And then prior to that, I served our great country as a helicopter pilot in the U.S. Army. I wanted to use this occasion for, I think, three key purposes. One, I wanted to certainly introduce myself to this body. Secondly, I wanted to have Floyd, who's our general manager for Colorado Electric. I think most of you know him. He's going to give a brief summary of our storm response, the March snowstorm. And then we're joined by Michael Harrington, who is our Director of Regulatory Affairs out of Denver, is going to give a update on our clean energy plan. And then I would be remiss if I didn't signal also a second major filing. This filing that Mike is going to talk about, we filed a few weeks ago on the clean energy plan, but also wanted to signal to this body that we want to come back later in the summer to brief you on a second filing that we have planned, June 14th to be specific, and that's our first rate review in 8 years. We're be premature to try to talk about that today because we're still undergoing the analysis and finalizing the filing. But once we have that filed and you have time on your schedule, we want to come back and step you through that. So that's what we wanted to get done today. And joining Floyd in talking about the March storm is Eric, who will join, which again, I think most of you know him. So with that, I'll turn it over to Floyd and he'll step you through our storm response. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Campbell. As Campbell mentioned, and John, my name is Floyd Wolf, General Manager for Colorado Electric. It is good to see familiar faces again, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity, and the team appreciates the opportunity to talk to you again about the storm response, Storm Kadir. I know some of you were able to sit through it when we presented to the Energy Committee, but we appreciate you giving us the opportunity to present to the council here tonight. So, you know, just to start off, Storm Kadir has been compared, and I know many of you know this, to Storm Uri. It was a large storm that carried severe weather with it. It was over 100,000 customers that were out of power across Colorado. What we saw for Black Hills Energy was right at just under 19,000 customers. You can see from some of the pictures that we have depicted here, some of the things that we were up against during this storm. There were conditions that were very tough on our team, but they persevered. What we're going to talk through today is some of the conditions and the ways in which we approached this storm and how we stepped through it. We also wanted to give you some of the behind-the-scenes aspects of how we approached the storm and the different facets in which we engage our organization so that we can respond efficiently and effectively for our community members. One of the things that we'll talk through just at a high level with the storm response is the incident command structure that we have. Eric is going to talk more about that in detail. But that's one of the ways that we step through a storm, in any storm, especially a major event like this one. One of the things that we keep top of mind, though, and I'd be remiss if I don't talk about this, is the safety aspect, though. We have great team members. We have guys in the field that are fearless, and they go after trying to get the customers back on, and they really care and take pride in getting our customers restored. But safety is our #1 priority. We want to ensure that each one of our team members go home safe every day. And that is not just during the storm, that's every day. So that's one of our large focuses. You'll hear us talking about safety events all the time. We don't just talk about safety events and events like tonight. We also talk about safety in our daily lives, so we take this home with us. You'll often hear us have share a safety event, and we do this at home as well. We take those shared lessons home with our family members because we believe that is first and foremost, and that is the culture of Black Hills Energy. The next thing that I'd like to highlight is just the readiness of Black Hills and being ready to respond. One of the things that we definitely ensure that we have is the skill set to make sure that we can respond appropriately. We have DOL, Department of Labor certified journeyman linemen. We also have Department of Labor certified substation electricians. We have a lot of facets of our business, but we always want to make sure we have the right skill set to address the situation that comes about. And that's not just the skill set from a perspective of response, but also the right tools. We also want to ensure that we're using the right tools for storm response. So that is definitely a focus from a readiness perspective. Mobilization is another aspect that we focus greatly on, and as an IOU, we have the ability to pull from different locations and different resources. For the storm, with just under 19,000 customers that were out, with the focus here in Canyon City. So for this storm, of course, it was across Colorado, but the epicenter for us was here in Canyon City. So we were able to pull from Pueblo. We were also able to pull resources from Rocky Ford for the storm response. The storm for us started, we're going to get into the detail of this, but the storm for us started on the afternoon of the 14th and then continued, and we were able, wee hours of the morning, we were able to get the last 74 customers on the 18th. And so with 98% of those customers being restored on day 2, you'll see some of the efficiencies and effectiveness that we were able to step through in getting customers back on. One of the things that happened to us during the storm, and you'll see the bullets, and I'm not reading the bullets because I know you guys can see those, but one of the things that we did have to step through was the uniqueness of the storm. And so as we looked at the storm and the conditions that were had, you had temperature fluctuations from 27 degrees up to 35 degrees. And what you had was you had freezing and then you had thawing. Now, is snow something that's unique to us? No, snow, ice aren't. But the conditions that we had with some of the wind mixed in caused the snow and the ice to stick to our lines. And so that is something that is unique. And so what you would have is you'd have what we call shedding. So as the lines would unthaw, you would have the snow that would drop off, and that causes the lines to shake violently. When that happens, they can touch. And when they touch, that causes an outage. Now, when that happens, or causes a fault, but when that happens, that does cause an outage. The reason being is because our system is set up to protect itself. So you'll have breakers at that point that open up to protect the equipment, and then from a safety aspect to protect anything else that might be out on the system. When that happens, though, when you have distribution lines that open up, if you will, and are de-energized, from a safety aspect, and this is what I talked about at the beginning, we ensure that we have a safety plan to go out and address this. So as much as we want to get customers right back on immediately, and we do take an approach in that fashion, we also have to make sure that we're patrolling the lines and making sure that they're safe, to ensure that there's no down lines or anybody that might be entrapped or anything like that. So we want to make sure that everything is safe before we re-energize. And at that point, we do step through a process, and we have procedures to energize our lines as quickly and as safely as possible. One of the things from this storm, before I hand it over to Eric to talk more in detail, that we did experience from the winds, and you see that last bullet, even though the system protected itself, we still saw some damage from it, and that was broken cross arms, insulators, static lines that were down. And in that response, that additionally added to, even though we got customers, 98% of the customers back on in 2 days, we still had to make those remediations and those repairs out in the field. And so even after we had customers back on, we got those last 74 on, we still had teams that were still having to work in the following days to repair the system back to where it was prior. So that's a lot of the storm response there, but I really want Eric to be able to talk to you more about the incident command structure, because that's what allows us to respond efficiently and effectively. So with that, I'll hand it over to Eric.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. My name's Eric Cisco. Day-to-day, my role is the construction planning manager for Colorado Electric. But during this storm, I was designated as the incident commander. Around 10 years ago, Black Hills Energy developed a major event response protocol to be used in handling of such events, such as large outages caused by windstorms, snowstorms, wildfires, and any other emergency events that impact our operations. This protocol is based on a modified version of the Incident Command System, which you may be familiar with. It was originally formed to assist in managing California wildfire responses in the late 1960s and was based on the management hierarchy of the U.S. Navy. What that does for us, Black Hills uses this as a means to quickly form a temporary management hierarchy that refocuses our organization from what our day-to-day roles are into an organization that has a prioritized focus on restoration of power outages. This is accomplished by drawing upon the resources from all three Colorado districts, as Floyd mentioned, Canyon City, Pueblo, and Rocky Ford. Excuse me. It not only includes line repair, but it also includes operations support roles from across the state. Many support roles are filled by personnel that are filling a designated role during the storm that's different from their day-to-day role. They're doing something different that is specifically focused on the storm. We basically modify our organization during a storm like that because our biggest priority becomes getting customers back on. Black Hills also relies on local partnerships with line repair and vegetation management contractors during these events. Beyond the state response that we have here within the state, our response protocol allows us to draw upon resources and designate personnel to support the restoration from afar across all of our 8 states. This protocol allows us to designate personnel into roles of public information officer, excuse me, police, fire, and emergency liaison officers, so that direct excuse me, so that direct lines of communication are established. Safety officer, a customer interface officer, providing customer communication through our call center, an operations chief leading people on the ground, doing the actual restorations, a planning support chief ready to provide engineering, IT, GIS, and communication support from across our organization, and a logistics chief that is designated to handle any logistical issues such as supply chain, equipment, and food for the emergency response personnel. At the beginning of the event, these officers and chiefs build out their temporary organizations, and they remain in those roles for the duration of the event. And that is to the last customer's restored. They don't go back to their daily lives, or they don't go back to their daily work. They stay in these roles until the last customer's restored. This team meets on a standardized cadence throughout the event to update progress and to ensure appropriate support is provided. In other words, during a storm or event, Black Hills operates in an all-hands-on-deck mode until the last customers are restored. And looking here at the chart that's up, Floyd mentioned it. You can see the early morning hours of the 14th at just after midnight. We started to see the first outages that were coming from the storm. Within about 12 hours, we peaked at almost 19,000 customers. Floyd mentioned it there that the 78%, by midnight on the first day, 78% of those customers 78% of those customers were restored on the first day, and then 98% of the customers were restored by the end of the second day. I'd point out on the graph it looks a little bit odd. This was not actually in the Canyon City area, but totally unrelated to our storm. Right next to I-25 in Pueblo, we had a car in the middle of the night hit a pole, a very particular pole that caused us to really spike again up to just over 11,000 customers out. You can see there that got restored very quickly. Great team, you know, already working on the other stuff. They kind of shifted focus in to get that back on. That brought us down into the, we were at about 400 customers at that point that were still out of power. This was at the end of day 2. As you get down into those smaller numbers, that's where the damage, the small damage is. It's in the backyards, it's places you can't get to, things like that. So we spent that next 2 days, the entire team, working on getting those outages restored, all the way down to the last 74, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, the last 74 customers. Just to look at the numbers, I won't touch on all of these, but you can see there, people in the actual field, the actual line workers and vegetation management. We were looking at about 86 people in the field for this storm. Most of those resources, as Floyd mentioned, were here in the Canyon City area, just because this was where the biggest impact was at the time. 27 poles down. I'd point to the 181 fuses. Whoops, sorry. I'd point to the 181 fuses. That's one of those protective devices that's going to protect our lines. So those were being replaced. That's where the damage was at. We were having to go through those and repair those areas and replace those. 10,500 feet of wire or conductor. But I would point to this last one, this temporary substation that was built. The last 74 customers, so later in the evening on the 17th, I believe Sunday, later in that evening, the majority of the customers were restored. But we had 74 customers in that Red Canyon area that had been out now for 4 days. In a pretty remote area, the line that feeds that actually comes up over the hill from 8 Mile into that Garden Park area. And Sunday morning, as they're trying to repair that line, it was very difficult to get to. As they were trying to repair that line, they were seeing more and more damage the further they got into that mountainous area, and harder to get to with the conditions and the snow conditions. So in parallel with those restoration efforts, we had a group of our leaders and linemen that were thinking outside of the box, and they had a spare transformer from an old substation that we had taken out years ago, and they came up with a plan to take that up there and install that, and they spent the day in parallel with all the other restoration, but they spent the day getting that installed as a temporary substation site to feed those last 74 customers. It probably, you know, not knowing with the rest of the damage, but it probably reduced those 74 customers' outage by probably 3 or 4 days. Just the damage that they were having to fix over the top of the mountain, it would have taken that much time to get that. It was a temporary solution, and I kudos to the guys that really came up with that idea and put it into practice. But again, I would just reiterate, nobody goes home until all of the customers are restored. So the same people we started out with, we were working with at the end of the time. So with that, unless you have any questions, I'll turn it over to Mike Harrington.
I would say if you have questions about the storm, you can maybe ask them now, and then we'll go on to Mike.
I had one question, John. Is there any way that, as a city, we would like to know if we have a lot of retirees that live here, if they're going to be without power for 3 to 4 days, we would like to know where they are so that we can reach out and see if they're all right. Because a lot of them are on oxygen devices, things like that, and I think that's probably our major concern, is that we would like more communication from you guys, if that's possible. Where are these pockets? So we can go door to door if we have to. Because 3 days is a long time with people with medical issues for them to be without power. And I think Kathy was up in Dawson Ranch, and how many days were you without? Okay. So, and there were others that were more. It's just that, we understand these things happen, but if there's some way that you could communicate with us in a more, a quicker fashion, that would be great. So we know that we can reach out to people. Thank you.
Take that. Yeah, I would just comment that, in terms of the medical device, we do have a process where when people are connected, if they do have medical equipment on site, there is a process for them to self-identify. They do get a form to fill out for their doctor to fill out and send back to us so that we can verify that information is on site, or that equipment's on site, and then we flag that account. We know that medical equipment is there. It does give them some priority, but it doesn't guarantee that they're going to be put back on service. Part of the disclosure is that if they do have that necessary medical equipment, that they do make plans for outages, or that they find an opportunity to get to a place. Worst case scenario, call EMS. If it's new equipment, so if I've been established as a customer and I'm there, then there's a process where they just contact our customer service area and then go through a similar process. So we are aware of the equipment when it's there. In terms of trying to communicate with the city, I was in pretty constant contact with Ryan and with the EMS of Fremont County. We can always try and do more. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Emily?
Thanks. I have a couple of quick questions, and on this first one, if I missed the answer, I apologize, but is there still any repair work remaining that isn't completed yet, or maybe anything related to that temporary substation, or anything else related to that area north of Canyon City? So that's my first question.
No, yep, good question, Councilor Tracy. So the line that does feed over the mountain that Eric referred to, we still will be making repairs to that line. So the picture that you saw there, or that you see there, that's currently up, that substation is currently in place right now still.
The temporary.
Yes, and what that'll do is will allow for a smoother transition as we work on that line and bring that back into service.
This is real vague information and may be worthless, but I had heard from someone kind of third hand, not maybe just a few weeks ago, that there's still lines in the North Canyon area, or a line hanging down, or not the way it should be. Have you heard anything about what that might be?
I have not, but if we have any information on that, we'd love to take that and we can check it out. Yep.
And then my other question is the same question I asked when you all presented to the city's Energy Advisory Committee, and that is, I was looking for a slide on that presentation that might say lessons learned at the top, and I thought I would ask that question again, whether, from a company perspective, if you feel like you learned anything about the distribution system or anything else that would be helpful going forward.
Absolutely. No, that's a great question. With every outage that we have, we definitely have a lessons learned meeting that we conduct with our group, not only here, but then the other team members that might not be here in Colorado. We have a reliability center that's in Rapid. So we make sure we bring everybody together to talk about how we can respond more effectively, more efficiently, because there's always opportunity. So there's always lessons to be had each and every time that we meet. One of the additional, and just because you asked about this line, one of the things that we are planning as we're going back and repairing this line, the line that serves these customers over the mountain with those cross arms, we are looking at installing those with more robust cross arms so that they'll be able to withstand the winds and the weather for next time, if that happens again.
Thanks. That's helpful, because part of my question, just as it was last time, was not just lessons learned from the response, but also in terms of the equipment. And so you're addressing one thing there. Was there anything else related to equipment that came out of this?
That was the main thing. Our equipment did respond like we wanted it to. It did protect itself. Some of the things you can't avoid, like I talked about earlier, the cross arms and the insulators and things like that. But as far as opportunities to make the system more robust, we're always looking for that opportunity. And that's one of the opportunities that we'll take here with this line.
Thank you.
No problem.
With that, I think we'll move on. If you want to advance to the next slide, we have Mike Harrington. He is remote today, and Mike will be talking about our clean energy plan. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, good evening. First, can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, good evening. It's great to be here with you all. Yeah, as John mentioned, my name is Michael Harrington. I'm the Director of Regulatory for Black Hills. And I focus, I've got responsibility for our regulatory activities here at the Colorado PUC. So I live up in the Denver area. Apologize I could not make it down there tonight, but thanks for giving us this opportunity to at least present remotely. So I'm excited to share with you all a little bit about our clean energy plan as we look to the future of what types of generating resources are going to be used to serve our customers. We're excited to kind of share our future vision for our clean energy plan. This is a project that started a couple years ago. I've personally been working on this since 2021. It started really with the legislature passing Senate Bill 19236, which is in 2019, which required electric utilities in the state of Colorado to file a clean energy plan with the Colorado PUC. And we announced our intention to file that plan in January 2021. In May, we made the filing with the commission, and this Canyon City participated in that filing, and we were able to reach a settlement agreement with the parties. The PUC divides up this process into two phases. We call phase one, which is where we go through our detailed modeling to identify a resource need. And the PUC approved a settlement agreement that we reached in about April last year, April 23. Like I mentioned, the city was a part of that settlement agreement. And then we started the phase two process in July last year, which is an RFP, a competitive response, where we issue an RFP to developers across the country. And we signal to them that we are looking for certain types of projects. We had an incredible response to our RFP. We received 113 bids from different developers. We got the attention of all the major national renewable energy developers, the big developers who build lots of renewable energy projects across the country. We were very pleased with the response, very competitive bids that we received. From October, our teams are really busy. Between October and April, pouring through all those bids, conducting analysis, conducting modeling results, research on the bids, and which led to a filing that we call the 120-day report. That was a filing we made in April. Essentially what that filing is, it's our recommendations to the PUC on which projects we'd like to move forward. Parties in this proceeding have an opportunity to file comment. Canyon City filed comment last week in our proceeding. So we really appreciate your involvement and your review of the case. Canyon City, along with a couple of the other parties in the proceeding, highlighted a concern with one of our projects. We're currently evaluating and reviewing the comments that we received. We will file responsive comments in a couple of weeks. And then ultimately the PUC makes a decision on our proposals. We anticipate the PUC will issue a final approval sometime in July. And then after we get the PUC approval, we then start negotiating final contracts with the developers, and then they start to construct the project. This is all leading towards a target in 2030 where the state has issued environmental emission reduction goals that we are aiming to achieve. Next slide, please. As we went through the bid portfolio, we focus heavily on the cost. So 75% of our criteria as we evaluate the projects is cost, which means we are looking to select the least cost portfolios, the least cost projects. 25% of our evaluation, we look at non-economic factors, which include things like employment, property, the developer, the developer experience, what kind of projects have they built, transmission access, and then local community support. But the majority of what we look for is cost. We try to find the least cost options to serve our customers. All right. So what we presented to the commission is 3 new projects that we'd like to move forward. First is a new wind project, which is up on the top right-hand corner of the map there. It's out in Kit Carson County, a little bit northeastern Colorado. This is the project that several parties, including Canyon City, have raised some concerns about. So we intend to address some of those concerns in our response. The other project that we have proposed is a solar project. You can see it, it's a blue circle there on the map. It's kind of southeast of the city of Pueblo. It is a 200 megawatt solar project. And then we've proposed a 50 megawatt battery storage project, which is the purple circle. Looks like a battery. It is close to our existing natural gas generation facilities. The 3 wind turbines you see down there kind of by Walsenburg, those are our existing wind farms. So we propose no changes to those. Okay. Economic impact was a pretty important criteria as we looked to try to find projects. We're happy that 2 of the 3 projects are located in our service territory, and that brings with it lots of economic development impact as we have construction activities that are brought in to build these facilities. And the other interesting thing, the third bullet I'll touch on is the Inflation Reduction Act, which was passed a few years ago, really increased the incentives for renewable energy projects. And it really allows for additional cost savings that get passed on to customers. So with those changes from the IRA, we're able to save customers over $270 million through the changes that the administration made to our tax laws. And that provides a direct customer benefit. And it's really helpful as we looked at adding a lot more renewables. This changes was really helpful to reduce the cost to customers. Our emission reduction estimates here, with these projects, we are forecasting an 89% reduction in our emission goals by 2030. The state statute has a target of 80% goal. And so we felt like we could cost effectively exceed the target and get to an 89%. And then we're also forecasting our ability to achieve these emission reductions sooner than the 2030 deadline. Okay, after we get these renewables, our system will be approximately 75% renewable energy, meaning the energy we provide our customers, most of it, 75%, will come from our wind or our solar facilities. With the increased renewables, you see our natural gas units will start to decrease. So the orange, looks like an orange chart, at least on my screen, is our natural gas generation facilities. those will start to be dispatched or run less, which provides natural gas fuel savings. So we will save customers on our natural gas cost. Our natural gas generating facility there, which is pictured, we call it the PAGS, which is our Pueblo Airport Generating Station. It is our natural gas fired generation power plant. While we will use less fuel at PAGS, that facility is incredibly important. I always call it the backbone of our system. Just because, just like the storm we were talking about earlier today, that PAGS facility is critical in providing the reliability to our customers. During that storm, as you could probably imagine, we had zero wind generation, and we currently don't have much solar, but if we did have solar, we wouldn't be getting much solar generation. And so what was providing power to our customers was our Pueblo Airport Generating Station at PAGS. So this facility is what allows us to continue to maintain, from a generating side, our reliability and providing customers that energy that they need. Okay, customer bills and rates. We certainly understand with customer bills, customer rates, as we look at adding additional generation facility. This is one of the most important things we look at. So as we look to fund this clean energy plan, customers should anticipate, or they will see, a new surcharge on their bill starting in January of next year. We're going to call this the Clean Energy Plan Rider. It is a 1.5% surcharge on customer bills. However, like I mentioned earlier, we're forecasting some offsetting cost. And so some offsetting reductions. First, in the fuel cost that we provide, which our fuel cost is recovered through the ECA, or the Energy Cost Adjustment. Fuel cost, which is important here to note, Black Hills and the company and utilities do not make money on fuel. We don't mark up the price of fuel. So when what we pay for fuel is what we pass along to our customers. But because we're adding some incremental renewable energy, we're forecasting the ability to reduce our fuel cost. And we also have some other surcharges on customer bills, like the RESA, the Renewable Energy Standard Adjustment, forecasting reducing that surcharge down. And so you can see on the graph, the blue line is our current, or is a historical view of an average residential bill. And then the orange line is our forecast of what we're seeing. It's important to note here on the forecast, really what we forecasted was only looking at the impacts or the cost to implement this clean energy plan. There are a lot of other surcharges and line items on the customer's bills that we did not adjust. So this line really just focuses on the cost to implement this clean energy plan. And I'll just close, and happy to answer your questions. As we look to the future about what is the best way to serve our customer energy goals, as we look to navigating our state requirements, which our state here has some very heavy emission requirements for utilities. One of the things that we constantly are very careful as we manage through the state policy is the cost of customers. Reliability, like you heard earlier, is one of our key corporate initiatives. Our corporate goals is providing safe and reliable service to our customers. And that is one of the things that was a huge focus as we tried to evaluate how do we incorporate and meet our state emission goals without reducing service to our customers, reliability to our customers. And so we're happy to present that plan to the commission. We're we're looking forward to working through the concerns and the questions that the parties raised. But we're excited for the future of kind of what our energy generation looks like. So with that, yeah, I'll happy to take your questions.
Thank you for that. Emily, you have a question.
Thanks. Yeah, a couple of questions. I may just not have heard it quite right, but you mentioned something about filing with the PUC June 14th or something like that. Is that this rider that you were talking about, or is that something else?
Yes, I'll take that. That is a second filing. Hawkins mentioned that we are planning and working on right now a separate filing for a rate case. It's kind of referred to as rate cases. It has been 8 years since Black Hills last went through a rate case with the commission. So what this is refers to customers' base rates. You look at your on your bill, your customer charge and the energy charge. So we are looking at revaluing those charges. Like I mentioned, it's been 8 years since the company last filed a rate case. So we're planning on making a filing with the commission shortly to start that process again of looking at changing those base rates.
When will customers know what that proposal looks like as far as the increase? Because I mean, right away, the first thing that occurs to me that the chart that you showed with the declining costs because of the added renewables, that chart's going to change, I assume.
It will. Yes, it will. We're finalizing our information right now, so customers will know fairly soon, within a few weeks, as to what our proposals are. And I think what we would like, and what Campbell mentioned earlier, is to try to get on you all's calendar sometime later, because we would like to be able to present much more detailed information when we have it all finalized with you all. There's a lot of things we're still trying to tick and tie some numbers, but we would love to come back and share more information about what that means, what we're proposing at some time in the future.
So I'll just say real briefly, and then I do have a second question, that it's not a happy thing to hear that a rate increase is being proposed, and we don't know the size of that yet. It's no secret to anyone here in the room and to you that we already pay the highest electricity costs in the state. So it's very concerning. And the other question I have, it might be for our city administrator, when you mentioned that the city has filed comments last week with concerns about one project. Has City Council seen those comments?
No, this is.
Will we?
We can, absolutely.
Okay.
It's in particular to the Kit Carson project with concerns about the cost of transmission back to this area.
Thanks. Yeah, it'd be great for at least, well, either council as a whole or the Energy Committee to see more about what was filed on behalf of the city. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy?
Would you mind going back one slide? I'd like to better understand the history, because it looks like there was a very dramatic increase from 2009 to 2011. Is that the building of PAGs, or could you talk a little bit about what drove it from, I think, an average cost of $70 a month up to $110? It looks like we're staying in the 100 to 110 since then, with no projection of ever decreasing, and knowing that this is already, well, in 9 days will perhaps be out of date, depending on the PUC's decision. But could you just speak about that driver and help us better understand why?
Yeah, absolutely. This one is related to that PAGS facility. Prior to Black Hills ownership of this service territory, the energy that was provided to our customers was acquired through a purchase power agreement with Xcel Energy. And around that 2009 timeframe, Xcel Energy notified that the contract was expiring in early 2012. And so Black Hills at that time acquired this territory in around 2008 timeframe. And with that contract expiring with Xcel Energy, it forced the company to seek to find a replacement energy. And so the company filed a resource plan with the PUC, which resulted in the construction of that Pueblo Airport generating station. So that is really what you see there, is that major spike that happened between 2010 up to 2012. Since then, the company has been very focused at maintaining customer bill stability. The last rate case that we had, I mentioned it, was in 2016, and which I think we're all familiar with. But you can see here on the chart that we have done a good job of maintaining our customer bill stability. We understand, and we are very sensitive to our customer bills. We are very sensitive to our customers' concerns about bills and high bills. And one of our focal points as we manage our budget, we look at our budget and our cost, trying to maintain our cost to serve our customers as low as possible. So that's been, since 2016, the last rate case, it has been a company initiative to try to maintain our cost to serve as low as possible. Unfortunately, 8 years has caught up. We've made significant amount of investments into our system, and especially with the recent inflationary pressures, which unfortunately we are subject to, with inflationary pressures raising our cost. We had to make the difficult decision to reevaluate our cost and made the difficult decision to file with the commission. Like I mentioned, we're happy to come back and share with you a little bit more about that once we kind of finalize our numbers and analysis.
So there's no expectation that over time the cost of PAGs would be defrayed and that we would be going back to the, $70 a month range. Like, we're not, PAGs has forever increased our rates to over $100 a month with Black Hills. I just want to make sure that I understand.
That was my question.
So there's with the PAGs generation, it is a contracted generation resource. So that contract with that resource is expiring in 2031. So this chart here just goes out to 2030.
That contract with their own company.
2031, we will be addressing a future replacement of that contract.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. One, it's always been a bone of contention because I worked for Xcel Energy when Xcel Energy notified Aquila in 2004 that we would not be renewing the wholesale purchase or selling of electricity to Aquila. And to this day, it is still proposed by Black Hills that they had no idea that that was happening. And so most of you in the room from Black Hills did not work at Black Hills at that time. But I will tell you that they were notified, and to me, unfortunately, they say that they had to build PAGs, which is true because they had to find a new source of energy. But I will say that they probably, Black Hills looked at it as a great opportunity as an investor-owned utility to help their stock price by building capital. And so we as the ratepayers have been paying for PAGs since then rather than Black Hills finding another existing source of electricity to distribute. So, and now we are still paying for PAGs on our bills, and there will now be an overlap between the renewable, the clean energy thing that you're going to be offering, and we're still paying for PAGs at the same time. So I do not see the bills going down anytime soon. And that's just my commentary.
Any other comments or questions from council? Yes.
Just a quick comment, just to be clear, and I've said this before in other settings, I have a place in Breckenridge, so my husband pays an XL power bill every month. So I have the benefit, or whatever you want to refer to it as being able to compare bills side by side. And it's shocking how much more we pay here for electricity. Now, yes, Xcel has, 15 times as many customers. They have some economy of scale. But this part of the state, as we all know, is a high-poverty area. The Pueblo, Canyon City area and other counties in this service territory, we have a much lower median household income here than the Northern Front Range, or even the statewide median household income, including all of Colorado. And I see this, I have in the past, and I see it now, as this cost of energy for us in this part of the state is a barrier to economic development, in addition to being a hardship for many, many people. I wish we could find another way to deal with this, but we have not yet.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? Anything that you'd like to say to wrap up?
Yes, we thank you very much for the time to share with this body our March storm response, as well as our plans for clean energy for the region. And we look forward to coming back and giving you a more detailed brief on the upcoming rate review. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And with that, we're adjourned.